Welcome to this episode of Good Day Carmel TV podcast. My name's Jeff Worrell, and today we are going to be talking about the approaching school referendum, which is a renewal, will be on the ballot November 7th. Joining me here is Dr. Beresford, Superintendent of Carmel Clay Schools Corporation. Welcome, Doctor.
Hey, thank you very much. Nice to be here on the podcast with you.
It is great to have you. I want to ask you a couple of questions to kind of set the tone here a little bit, but then we are also going to have a panel discussion where Roger McMichael will be joining us, head of the PAC, and also a concerned citizen who wrote some really timely letters to the editor. And in the spirit of full transparency, we're going to have a conversation. I'm looking forward to that. But all right, this is a renewal. But some people say, well, all right, if the state legislature allows us to do renewals, why do we need to renew it? What has changed? What's the same? Can you kind of just give our listeners a little feel for that?
Yeah, back in 2009, the state legislature made it possible for school districts to ask their community to pay a tax, self-imposed tax, to support their school systems. And so Carmel has done that since 2010. And then the current referendum that we're operating under is going to run out in the 2024. So we're asking to renew that exact same rate, exact same referendum for the next 8 years.
So you're being very transparent. You have a website set up, which is part of the Carmel Clay's website, but type in referendum.
Yes, you can type referendum in at the search box at the top of our website, and it'll take you to a lot of factual information about the referendum. And it's a real easy, factual resource for anyone to be an informed voter.
But I will warn, because I did it, I wanted to be sure I knew what I was talking about. When you put in the amount of your house and estimating the tax calculator, it's already what I'm currently paying. That's not in addition to. Do I have that right?
You're exactly right. And so I get that question a lot is why is the district raising the taxes? We aren't. It's going to just be an extension of exactly what you're paying right now.
Yep.
When people say, how much am I going to pay? I'm going to say, you're paying exactly what you're paying right now.
Right. And, of course, there's assessed value changes and all those, and we've dealt with that the entire time. But that is a great point to make. And it's no fault of the person reading the website. You read the ballot question, and clearly right there it talks about something making it sound like it's new, but you're clear. And I even talked about that at our city council meeting. That's because that's state law. It has to be worded that way.
Right. We only get to add a few words to the question. And if you're not an informed voter and you read that question, you will think that your taxes are going up 28.3% because that's on the ballot question. But you just have to understand that it's 0.19, just like it's been for the last 6-7 years, and that 28.3% means 0.19. You're not paying any more taxes than you're paying right now, no matter what you read on that ballot question, because it's very misleading to the voter.
All right, good point. And I think we're going to get into some of those kind of financial discussions with Mr. McMichael, who's going to help us understand that even further. But when we think about this as a community, we currently have this Operation Safety Referendum in place. Also, the community voted on a, operational referendum, and then the community voted on the safety referendum. But there is a reason why we need to do this, and how would it affect our community if it didn't happen?
Yeah, I get that question a lot too, is what happens if we lose?
Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, it'll just be devastating. So the referendum money that we get from the taxpayers right now is about $25 million. And so that represents about 20% of our education fund, which we use to pay and benefits for our teachers and administrators and guidance counselors, about everybody in the building.
Okay.
And so if that doesn't pass, then that puts me and my administrative staff that we're going to have to figure out a way to drop $25 million. We're a people business, so really the only, and we are, Mr. McMichael will tell you, he can stretch a nickel thin, very efficient with our taxpayer money. So really, if you're talking about cutting $25 million, you're talking about cutting $25 million of staff. And some staff you can't fire. You have to have bus drivers. You have to have food service workers. So really, the biggest impact on it will be that we'll have to reduce the number of teachers, and we'll have to make the class sizes higher.
Right.
The other thing is we'll probably have to get rid of some programs, because with fewer staff and it'd be up to 1 in 5 teachers. It's 20%. So if you just look at that as a raw percentage, probably 1 in 5 would have to go.
Yeah. Now I think it would be devastating, but we're not trying to scare anyone here. This is just simply a reality of what the schools are up against. Mm-hmm. But the other reality is, in the past, Carmel supports referendums. The last one passed, if my memory is correct, at
89.
89. Okay, I round up. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty spectacular, and I know from an economic development standard, from the city standpoint, we're always talking to people about the wonderful schools, how the community supports the schools. What can you say to that?
Oh, I talk about it all over the state with my colleagues and anyone who wants to talk about it. We always say we are so fortunate to live in a community that supports us the way we do. The reason why we have a resource officer in every school in the district, which is not common in Indiana, is because of our community supporting us for that. The reason why we have competitive wages and we draw the best and the brightest is because our community supports us with the referendum dollars.
Yep.
When we're the second lowest funded district in the state, that referendum money is what brings us up to competitive with our neighbors, and so it's just vital. And I couldn't be prouder of our community because our community supports us financially, but also in a lot of other ways.
I think that really is the key to this whole discussion, and we're almost out of time. But I want to make sure that we, that we focus on that. When you when you leave Carmel Clay Schools, you have a document that is valuable, and we hear this over and over and over again, and we don't want to lose that.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many people walk up to me and say, I'm the parent of 3 Carmel graduates, and they're doing great, and they're doing great because of the education they got at Carmel High School and really all the Carmel Clay schools.
Yeah.
And then the other comment I get a lot is, hi, we're from somewhere in Illinois or Ohio or California, and we moved here for the schools.
There you go. That's exactly right. Okay, Carmel City Council supported a resolution encouraging voters to vote for it in November. That passed unanimously, 9-0, I believe. Lots of great things if anyone wants to check that out. Is there anything else we need to know before I go get into the hard questions with our panelists?
If you haven't registered to vote, register to vote. And when you vote, vote yes. And this isn't about Dr. Beresford. This isn't about Carmel Clay Schools. This is about the children of our community.
That's right.
And we appreciate your support for all these years. Let's do it some more.
Okay. Website?
Go to the website, and you'll have factual information on everything you need to know to be an informed voter.
And I'm trying to think. It's
it's
I'll put it up. I'll post it.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. All right. We will be back in just a moment with our panelists after this short break. And we're back. You are watching Good Day Carmel TV podcast. I got to admit, this is really Good Day Carmel's first attempt at a podcast, but I thought that the topic was really timely and important for our community, so I am happy to offer to the Carmel community panelists, and we're going to be discussing the referendum, the school operating referendum, which we all will be asked to vote on November 7th. In the voting booth. So I have a great team of panelists. We've just heard from Dr. Beresford, who really set up the purpose. He talks about the why and how much it's going to cost and of this renewal. And I do want to be clear in referring to this as a renewal of the referendum that is currently in place. So my name's Jeff Worrell, and joining me today is Roger McMichael, who is the business manager, and you are the superintendent, associate superintendent of Carmel Clay Schools, going on 30 years. Is that right?
Yes.
Welcome. I know that you are considered an expert, a leader in school finance. You've been with the corporation a long time. I'm really happy to have you on the panel as we get into the details of finance all around this referendum. Over to my right is John DeBoer. You are a parent in the Carmel Clay Schools, and Mr. DeBoer, he wrote a letter to the editor that was titled, this was a July 7th letter to the editor titled, Dear Carmel Clay Schools, ... about that operating referendum. And what I noticed is that you asked some pointed questions regarding the finances and really generated a robust discussion online within our community. And so I thought it would be helpful to have you, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
Happy to be here.
All right. And you have kids in the school. How many do you have?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. Yep. All right. Very good. And then I also have Nicki McNally. She is also a Carmel Clay parent. She has 4 children, 2 currently in the school, but 2 have already left and gone on with that wonderful resource, which is a diploma from Carmel Clay Schools. I know the value of that. So welcome. You are also head of the PAC Yes for CCS.
Correct.
All right. Welcome to the podcast. So our panel. So I thought I might just kind of start out today by asking you, Nicki, could you kind of tell us why we have a PAC, the purpose of the PAC, and what do you do as far as supporting, I'm going to assume, Yes for CCS, supporting the referendum, and what kind of activities are you undertaking right now?
Sure. So the main reason to have a PAC when you are putting a referendum on the ballot is to educate the community. So if you're talking to people around town, you will probably find that a lot of people don't know that this is going to be on the ballot in November. So that is the PAC's job, to get the message out. There are a lot of restrictions with what individuals that work for the schools can do as far as promoting the PAC. Teachers cannot discuss a PAC, schools cannot discuss a PAC on school grounds. Only the superintendents and associate superintendents can promote the referendum, so it's our job to get the message out to the community as best as possible. And we do that through a number of ways. We're really just getting started. We're all volunteers, we're parents. It's a bipartisan group of people that just really care about keeping our schools great, like they are now. And so you'll be seeing social media from us. You'll see a little bit of digital advertising. You might see us knocking on your door to talk about it. But we're really just trying to gear up and get ready for some of those activities over the next couple of months.
Okay. And so I know the schools have a website, a resource website.
Yes.
Do you also maintain some kind of a resource?
Yes. Our website is yesforccs.org.
.org. Okay, very good. All right. Okay, very good. So I'm going to toss it over to John DeBoer. And loved your letter, loved your engagement in the community. I think my goal here and is always fiscal clarity, honesty with the taxpayers. Carmel, we obviously know how to spend money on the government side, but we want to always be very just aware and be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I really appreciated the way you approached this question. There was the last paragraph of your letter I noted, and it said that you were that you encouraged Carmel Clay Schools, the corporation, to be more open, transparent, and truthful with its constituents in order to see this operating referendum pass in the fall.
Correct.
So as I read that, you asked some pointed questions, but as I read that, I was trying to understand, are you for the referendum, but you just have questions you want answered? Or tell me a little bit about what your position is.
Sure. So at the time that I wrote the letter to the editor, I was in evaluation mode. And one of the first things that I did was to go out to the Carmel Clay Schools website, and I saw a couple of pieces of information that caught my attention. One was that the operating referendum was used primarily for teacher salaries and benefits. And then the other piece was in discussing the 5 funds and referendums, or the 5 major funds and referendums. The point was made that each fund or referendum has its purpose and cannot be commingled. As I did further research on the Indiana Department of Education Finance Dashboard and the Dollars to the Classroom report, I found those things to appear to not necessarily be true. And so that's what raised the questions for me. And Roger and I discussed this. We talked about the fact that the operating referendum recently has had operational expenses booked against it, which creates the appearance that it's not being truly used for teacher salary and benefits, or primarily used for teacher salary and benefits. And so we talked about the fact that that was what he called a booking issue. We also talked about the fact that the statement on the website wasn't fully accurate, because if you go into the Indiana Department of Education finance dashboard and you look at how the funds are spent on a year-to-year basis, there are transfers from one fund to another. And so he acknowledged that that statement was not fully accurate and probably the end of it should be deleted for full clarity. But when there's information out there, and I'm not suggesting that you or anybody else at Carmel Clay Schools has nefarious intent, but when there's inaccurate information out there, then it causes me as a citizen, as a parent, to ask more questions and ask myself, can I trust this information? Is there more to this? And it causes me to dig in.
Okay, and so I want to be clear to anyone that might be listening. You do feel like, so you and I have talked.
Yes.
And my understanding is that you were able to meet with Roger.
Absolutely.
Got good answers to questions.
Yeah, we had a great back and forth dialogue.
And that you are now comfortable with some of the questions that you had. Would that be an accurate statement?
That's accurate.
Okay,
yes.
good. And see, that's the beauty of this process, in my opinion, is that, and this happens to me all the time over on the government side, is making sure that we get, okay, if there's something, and nothing is ever always obvious, I've learned in government, don't know about schools, but boy, on the government side, I've learned that there are just some things we have to do by state statute, and it's not the same way that we run our checkbooks at home, but the way government has to operate. I'm assuming some of these things are true with your discussion with John. How has the dialogue back and forth been, Roger?
Well, I think it's been great, and I've told John, and I would want everybody to hear this, that I truly appreciate his willingness to spend time on this.
Thank you.
Which, to me, it simply reflects that this is very, very important to him. He has a young child in school, and at the same time, he's a taxpayer as well. And the fact that he's one of the very, very few in the community that will make it his business to get informed, I think that's commendable.
That has been my experience with John as well. So I really appreciate it. So did you want to make any comments to some of the things that you two discussed as far as details or why it is the way it is? Or maybe John has the details, but someone who might be listening, would they come to the same conclusion that John did that might need some explanation?
They likely would. And so that's why, again, I appreciate John and his participation, really, because what happens when you put a bunch of good people together, you end up with a better decision. And so the questions he's raised will that have not been raised before will cause us to think about that. And that's why I said, well, John, that comment about commingling, in the broad sense, it's Indiana funding is set up for schools as fund accounting, and each fund does have a purpose. And you can't use debt service, as was explained earlier, to pay teachers' salaries. So as far as it goes, that's absolutely correct. And so, but there are within this, $250 million a year expenditures, as a part of the accounting is there are transfers. And so when you look at the numbers, look at the state, it certainly would seem inconsistent with those comments.
Okay.
And but if you take the time, as John did, to ask that question, and then hopefully you'll get an answer and a response that now it will make sense to you. At least it will hopefully satisfy that the school representatives such as myself are credible, and that's what's important. If the school district and those that represent it are not credible, you're not likely to agree to raise your taxes. And the unfortunate part about that is if we don't do our jobs, if that's the end result, it's ultimately it's the children in the community that will suffer, and really the adults in the community as well.
Yeah.
And so it can be a complicated issue, but it's obviously very important.
Right.
Yep.
I think one thing that I've always gained comfort in is that when we are asking these big asks, and it's a significant ask for anyone, for a taxpayer to say, to be asked to, give more of their money towards specific things, government or schools, whatever. And it's always given me comfort to know that we have very good people, not only behind the desk, but also in the homes, people who are willing and highly educated, expertise in lots of different areas. I'm sure you're seeing this too, Nicki, who are willing to put the time in to do the research. So, John, I might just turn it back over
Sure.
to you. Do you have any other issues or questions? Well, I have the expert here. Are you fully satisfied that the homework part is over for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the homework part is done. And to be clear on my position, I mean, I'm going to support the referendum. I'm going to say yes to CCS. The reality...
Can we sell you a sign for $15?
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. But the reality is voters are being asked to vote one of two ways, either for 0.0 or 0.19, right?
Right, correct.
At the end of the day. I can't sit here with 100% certainty and say 19 cents is fully needed. I'm going to be totally transparent. But the reality is that's the decision we're faced with. And at the end of the day, I fully support our teachers, I fully support our students, and I am not going to vote against the referendum where there is a possibility, high degree of probability, however you want to characterize it, right, where teachers may lose their jobs as a result of this community voting against the referendum. So I want to make that 100% clear, but I also, at the same time, have had conversation with Roger about bringing this community along and really helping them see how they scrutinize their operating expenses to make sure that year over year they're doing their job to be fiscally responsible and that they are using the funds that they're asking of taxpayers in a responsible manner.
Fair point, and I'm going to give you a minute, Nicki, but I raised the same issue in my statement, and I was assured, I think Dr. Beresford was in the audience and I caught him nodding his head. You have a track record of not spending all that you could, or not collecting, maybe is the right way to say it, because you didn't need to spend it all that you could in the safety referendum.
Right.
Nicki, I'm going to get to you, but can you just give us a minute on that?
I can. So when the safety referendum came in, it was different than this referendum in the sense that it was for things that were new. We wanted to provide a school resource officer in every school. We have had resource officers in the secondary schools specifically for several years, but this was an expansion. We wanted therapists to provide therapy for students. So that was new, and therefore when the dollars came in, we didn't have all those people employed at that point. And so we didn't need all the money that a 5-cent tax rate would raise. So we set it at 3.5 cents for the first 3 years, and that allowed us sufficient funds to add the police officers and so forth as they became available, and kind of grow into the program. Also establish some reserves, as we do in any fund for unforeseen circumstances. And then after 3 years, now we're fully staffed. Now we felt that the need was for the 5 cents. And so if you checked, as John would, and we appreciate it, our reserve balances and so forth, what you'd find is that Carmel historically has been conservative in terms of how much reserves we maintain. We typically had a minimum of 8%, and that's more than coincidental that that's equal to 1 month.
Yeah.
And so it seems reasonable that we would be able to pay our bills for a month if something unforeseen
Exactly. Great point. Nicki, yeah.
Okay, so I actually have a question for Roger, because I think we have gotten a little bit into the weeds, which is great, but for the general listening audience, I think this is really important. And first I'll say, in the 16 years that I've had kids in schools, I've learned a lot of things. And it always hasn't always been great. But from a financial side, Roger has always been a very conservative and excellent steward of the finances and the taxpayer money. And any conversation I've ever had with him personally or seen at a board meeting, is incredibly transparent and just a wealth of knowledge on school funding. So we are in such good hands, and you're never allowed to retire. So I do not know what will happen.
I hear that a lot, yeah.
Once you go. But my question is, because I want to take this opportunity to really help the community understand, and John touched on it a little bit, the ballot question isn't should we do 15 cents. The ballot question is all or nothing.
Right.
And my concern with 2 kids still in the school district is what's going to happen when we lose 20% of our budget because people didn't understand and voted no. Dr. Beresford touched on it a little bit, but what is that really going to look like? Because I have an 8th grader, and is he going to be in class with 35 people instead of what he gets now? Are we going to not be able to hire the best and the brightest teachers so his education is subpar to what my graduate school son and college age son got? That's what I think it's really important for people to understand. If this fails, what is going to happen to not only just the kids in the schools, but our community on the whole? Because as Jeff mentioned before, people move here for the schools, and if we lose that, then I think we lose a lot more than just what's happening in the schools.
Yeah. In the first part of our podcast, Dr. Beresford did talk about how difficult that would be to cut $25 million and what that would mean. I think what we heard was increased class sizes and cutting programs. So we did kind of talk about that. Do you have were you directing that to John or to Roger?
I just wanted to hear from a financial perspective what
Let's
he
do it.
thinks it'll do, because that's really what this all
Sure.
comes down to.
Okay.
Well, we get the question. I've heard that question a lot. Well, what would you cut? That my experience over the years has been, and I've never had an experience of cutting $25 million, as Dr. Beresford said. I don't know anybody that has. But it occurs to me that, but the process is at least a year to have that conversation. So what I could say, and it occurred to me that if we said, take your child's teacher, and that's one of 2,200 employees. And so if we were to just, rather than cut individuals entirely and programs entirely, if we reduce $25 million, 90% of which is going to come from salary and benefits. So take that teacher, and let's say that person's making $60,000 a year, and reduce that 20%, but that the teacher also takes our family insurance and reduce that 20%. That's about $4,000 if they're taking family insurance. So we're going to reduce their salary $12,000, increase their insurance $4,000, and if we do that for everybody in the school district as a percentage, that's what it looks like. And then ask yourself how many would, because we do have the best and the brightest, and so they have choices, and so they're not all going to stay, and then we're going to try to replace them with that reduced benefit package and salary package, and so that's what it looks like.
Go ahead, John.
To support that and keep me honest here, as I've done, my homework, CCS spends, I think it's about $90 million in non-instructional expenses a year, right? A third of that, give or take, is the debt.
Yes.
Right? So if you do the math, that's about $60 million. We would be asking you to cut almost half of your operational expenses, which is
That's
a
right.
pretty big ask, right? So that's why I sit here and say, I can't sit here and not vote for the referendum, because it is very clear that by not voting for the referendum, we are putting teacher salary and benefits at risk and in jeopardy.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, panel. I think that's a good place to leave it. Well, actually, I don't want to leave it on a terrible note. That seems very grim. So,
On a
Nikki,
positive
yeah,
note,
Nikki, how do we
Carmel
help?
has been incredibly supportive of our schools. I've lived here since 2004. In all of that history, they overwhelmingly supported the referendum in 2017 and 2010. That is this operating referendum and the school safety referendum. So I know that deep down our community understands and supports the schools that we have. And
I believe, is it true, 89, wasn't it passed by 89%?
the last one.
Yeah. I mean, that's
unheard of.
That's unheard of and amazing, but it just shows the importance of schools to our community. Real quick, we just have minutes.
Yes.
How would someone get involved in your PAC?
So there's a lot of ways people can help. Go to yes for the word FOR, yesforccs.org, and it'll let you know how you can order a yard sign, how you can donate. Unfortunately, just like any campaign, it does take money. Any kind of donation helps us get the word out to citizens in the community that might not know about the referendum, people that don't have kids in the schools, even people with kids in the schools don't always know that the referendum is going to be on the ballot.
Right. I think when we spoke in the spirit of transparency, you are looking for about 15 grand.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is not. These are. This isn't dollar donations.
Yes, because we need to get some digital advertising out there. We need people to see this so that they don't misunderstand and really know what is at stake. Because as Dr. Beresford said, apathy could be a real problem for getting this passed. If people just assume it's going to pass or don't know about it or don't go out to vote, the biggest way you can help is to go vote and vote yes.
Yep. Bottom line, John, I just think you get kudos for speaking up and making us all rely on your homework. And now I feel even more confident that this is the right decision to make. Appreciate, Roger, I know on a Sunday you were helping me understand as I was preparing for my vote on Monday. So thank you to all of our panelists. Nicki, thank you for the work you're doing and the support. Thank you to Dr. Beresford. Along with our panelists, my name is Jeff Worrell. Thank you for watching Good Day Carmel TV podcast. We hope to bring you future interesting topics about our community, this great place Carmel is, and I'm looking forward to seeing you around Carmel.